So now we're going to transition to our next live representative, who is Chris Jacobs, Congressman in the 27th Congressional District. Congressman Jacobs, thank you so much for being with us today. We apologize for the confusion.
Oh, no problem. Hi, Todd.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we normally start with the 2 to 3 minutes of whatever standard campaign planks you like, and then we have some questions for you.
Well, it's great to be here. I've come before this organization. It's been my honor to come before you on several occasions. When I ran for Senate most recently and county clerk prior to that. I may have come earlier than that on the school board when I ran for the Buffalo School Board, not sure, but certainly interacted with you at that capacity. I've been in Congress now for 3 months. I won in the special election in June and took office in mid-July. Been very busy trying to get that office back operational. When I launched my campaign a year and a half ago rather, I stated that this region deserved full representation, and at that point the incumbent couldn't fully represent, I didn't think, because of legal challenges he had, and we needed a representative who could serve on committees and be a strong voice. When I got into office, I realized that actually all the offices had been closed and staff all let go. So I've been very busy getting the offices back up and running. I'm nearly fully staffed back down in Washington, and so legislating and being active down there. And as important, or more important, since with COVID and all that's going on, is the district offices here, so we can get back to the casework and constituent needs. And there's a lot of them. So we've processed over 300 casework files. But I look forward to continuing to serve in Congress. I hope I get elected in November to be able to serve a full term. I believe my experience serving in a very local level government, as a school board member, county level, as Erie County clerk, state level, and I have previously served at the federal level, not an elected office, but at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That was my first job right out of college. So that combined with private sector experience, nonprofit experience, I started a scholarship fund in the area called the Bison Fund, and also was a co-founder of one of the first charter schools. I believe my diversity experience in the public sector, the private sector, and government makes me equipped to have the experience necessary to be an impactful representative for this region. That's what I'm going to try to do if elected for a full term.
Okay, that's a wonderful beginning. I'm going to start with a question that I have. I know as a current congressman and part of the Republican minority, there's a lot of discussion about what's happening in local communities with COVID, and especially in terms of the argument about continued stimulus funding. And the congressman is, of course, aware that state services, including those that our community depends on, are taking a hit on a 20% withhold. But there seems to be some resistance trying to move forward with state and local funding. And I know you've got an opinion about that, so I wanted you to be able to get that out there for us.
Sure. I think I've met with almost every one of my local governments and had online calls with school districts, and the problems and challenges they have are real and need to be addressed. It was not their fault that all the businesses got shut down. That was a government act, and that caused the situation with sales tax revenue going down and so forth. I am fully supportive of an additional stimulus bill. I'm also a co-sponsor of the SMART Act. Tom Reed is one of the leads on that, which was more targeted funding just for state and local governments to deal with that issue. If we couldn't come to an agreement on an overall stimulus bill, to at least get that done, because we really can't wait. Local governments are really at wit's end financially. I was hopeful that this would get done prior to the election. It seems like it's clear it's not going to. I hope soon after November 3rd, we will come together and get something done. And, I know that there's some on my side, mostly at the Senate, who are really adamant about not wanting to, quote unquote, bail out poorly run state governments, that were already in had financial problems. I think it's very easy to be able to distinguish what was a source of COVID and what was not a source of COVID. So New York State had a bit of a deficit for sure, but their deficit ballooned as a result of COVID. So we can insist, I would hope, come to agreement on a system on what was clearly COVID related. I also believe, as we talk about just the CARES Act, both the state of New York and many local counties still have a lot of CARES Act funding because there was such stringent requirements put on that, or stringent limitations, that it could only go for COVID related expenses, and COVID related expenses did not include revenue loss. So I've been talking with some of my members to say, look, let's broaden that a little bit to allow these funds to go where they're needed. Many of these governments are reining back in new expenditures because of loss of revenue. So, but to go back to the bigger question, I certainly hope, and I will be advocating as strong as I can, that a full-fledged additional stimulus is passed soon after November 3rd.
Okay. A question from our Facebook feed, talking about your support for the president. There seems to be some the comments about the fact that you've been very supportive of the president in the past, but haven't heard much about that in the campaign. So from a statement of assisting people with disabilities, for example, how do you think the president's done?
Well, I've said I'm clearly supportive of the president, his national policies, his policies of getting our economy going, the tax reform he did, in terms of standing up on the international stage for the United States, pushing for trade deals that are good for our region, like the new trade deal with the replacement of NAFTA, which is going to really help our automotive sector here, and our in my district that I represent, the dairy is going to be very significant because it was removed a lot of dairy tariffs over in Canada. And also an awareness about the concern about China, that we need to take a different tack with them. The disabled community, I would say I would like to hear from the community more on what their take on it is. I can tell you I will be as strong an advocate for the disability community as a member of Congress as I was in the Senate, and that came from trying to meet as much as possible with organizations affiliated with this movement. And I would say, in my first term in the Senate, I worked very hard in terms of the Be Fair to Direct Care campaign, recognizing the desperate need to raise salaries of those workers. And I would say that of my first 2 years in the Senate, that was the biggest accomplishment I was most proud of. So I think we need to do more. Clearly, we need to do more. I was glad there was some funding in the CARES Act, which was a three-way negotiation, which the administration had a role in. But there needs to be more to be done there.
All right. The last question for a congressman is going to come from Mr. Shaw. Mark?
All right. Well, you said that you've been working hard to get your offices back up and running and open and restaffed. If you're elected again, will you have individuals with disabilities on your payroll and your office staff? And also, do you have any at this point?
That's a good question. I do not at this point have anyone. I'm very amenable to that. I certainly had workers when I was county clerk. And I think it's very important as a broader community we need to do more broadly in terms of advocating for the employment of the disabled community. My understanding, we still have a very, very low rate of employment, about 19% of employment compared to the national or the average of the broader community. And we need to, and the funding should go for this too, to make sure there's sufficient outreach to our employers, public and private, of the value of the disabled community as a workforce. And everybody I've talked to that has a workforce with the disabled community always says what a great workforce they are. I did want to mention another issue that I think is very important. Well, two issues with this district. One, two that they really cut across the district broadly, and it ties into a lot of things, but employment as well. And that would be the need for better internet, high-speed internet in this district, or rural broadband as they call it. Much of the community is woefully completely without or very intermittent, weak service, and that is impacting kids who are trying to go to school remotely, telehealth, but also working remotely. In which this is going to be, we'll get back to some normalcy, but people are going to work remotely more, and this is an opportunity for the disabled community as well. We need to invest in that infrastructure across this district and across the country. And the other issue I want to be involved with is trying to improve the situation in terms of transportation. Transportation in NY27 that I represent is largely a rural area, and transportation is not where it needs to be for the broader community. It's certainly not where it is for the development of the disabled community. And in that regard, I was placed on and asked to be on the Agriculture Committee, which is one place I think I can advocate for this, but I'm also pushing very hard to get on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which I think would be a great complement to agriculture, to advocate for improved transportation broadly, transportation, paratransit, and so forth.
Well, Congressman, as you've been talking, I've had other questions come across the feed, but I've run out of time and I have people standing backstage. So I do want to let our viewers know that any questions that you submit, we will send to the Congressman and post his responses, because we want to make sure any question you have for him, he has the opportunity to answer. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I wish you the best of luck in your campaign.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Look forward to working with you in the future.
Love to.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in.